Hey, what is up guys? Welcome back to the channel and welcome back to Gran Turismo 7. So in today's video I'm going to be putting all of the SEMA award winning cars that are in Gran Turismo 7 up against each other to see which one is ultimately the best. Now they're very equal in terms of price, they're all priced at 300,000 credits, so we're not going to take into consideration the likes of price, but we will take into consideration the like of looks, acceleration and top speed, track performance and one lap performance. So on to the cars we're going to be using. First and foremost, we're going to be using the Fugu Z, which is the one that you're seeing in the background. We also have the CHC Chevy Nova. I'd probably say this is one that's kind of a hidden gem. It is a really wild and wacky car, and I would suggest anyone to go and give it a try. Then we have the Wicked Fabrication 51 GT. Certainly a looker of a car, but it does have the downside of being actually the only one of this entire bunch that runs on a comfort compound of tyre in comparison to a sports compound of tyre. Then we have the Roadster Shop Rampage. I think we all know this one. I believe it came with the May 2022 update. It does have its engine available to go into other cars as well. Overall, this is probably the most aggressive and I'd say overall aero-styled car, obviously based on an old Camaro. Then we have the GAC Maverick, the latest one and the latest edition, coming in the May of 2023 update. 1200 brake horsepower, this one, a bit of a monster in a straight line, but will it kind of prove to be okay around the track? Well, we'll wait and see for that one. Certainly a looker and based on obviously the old compact car. And then finally, to round out the SEMA cars, we do have the Mach 40. Now, this is a bit of a strange one in my opinion. At first, it kind of just looks like a typically stretched classic Mustang shape. But in all honesty, it's a little bit of a wacky car. It does have the power plant from a Ford GT, I believe. So overall, it's definitely a lot more potent than you'd originally think. But I think just in terms of its dimensions and such, it does look a little bit odd. So we're going to go into our first category for this video, and that is going to be the looks of the cars. So this is going to be very personal, but for first place, I have to give it to the CHC 1967 Chevy Nova. In my opinion, it just stands out from the rest of them as being a very kind of, I guess, true to design car, but very kind of classy and rather a bit of a beast to drive. So in all honesty, in terms of its looks, interior and all that stuff, I just have to give it to the Chevy Nova. There's just something about the shape and the styling and just how it looks inside as well that really does appeal to me. So we're obviously going to be ranking them 1 to 6, so up in second place, I'm going to have to give it to the Wicked Fabrication GT51, just for its typically classic of the time looks. It really does look like a kind of full-blown classic race car. Now obviously in terms of performance-wise, the downside to this is those comfort tyres. But in terms of looks, it's sleek, it's typically classic styling. Interior-wise, it's absolutely stunning. It's got side exit exhaust, stickered tyres. There's just nothing not to like. It only just missed out on first spot, mainly just because of my preference to that Chevy Nova looking so stunning. But the Wicked Fabrication, yet again, holds its own. The GAC Maverick is going to come in P3 for me. So this is probably not going to be to everyone's preference, but there's just something about the Maverick that I absolutely love about it. Obviously, it's a 1200 brake horsepower monster, but just in terms of some of the custom parts that are on this, it really is a looker. If you ever go ahead and look at the, standard Maverick of the time, this thing essentially just turns the aggro up to 1,000,000. The stance of the thing at the rear, it kind of almost looks like a full-blown drag car. The custom lights, just everything about this car stands out to me. Then we have probably the most aggressive and in-face one of the bunch, the Roadster Shop Rampage. Now, I would have typically moved this up the list. However, I just think the other cars are just much better looking for some reason. I really do like the aggressive style to it. I like the fact that it looks like a typical race car. Obviously, essentially, inside it's fully stripped out, fully race ready. It is a massive looker. And that's not to say any of these cars are really that, I guess, ugly looking. There is none that just kind of stands out to me as bad looking, but again, I just have to put the others ahead of this one. Then we have the Gredi Fugu Z. Now this to me, I don't know what it is. Okay, it's got the Rocket Bunny kit on and such, but I think just my time on like in the car scene and such, it just fails to stand out as much of the you know, as the kind of rest of the cars. I guess at least to today's standard. I think we've all seen a modified Z car with the typical Rocket Bunny kit on, and again, I just cannot give it that extra place as much as I love this car, and I think it's such an awesome original JDM car. Yeah, I just cannot put it ahead of the others. And then last we do have the Mach 40, and I think this is mainly just due down to how it looks. I guess when you first look at it, you know, don't get me wrong, it's definitely not a bad looking car, but it's just weird kind of seeing a classic Mustang shape, you know, that looks absolutely overstretched. And to be honest, I'm not a huge fan of the wheels. One good redeeming thing about this, in my opinion, though, is the fact that the engine is in the back of this thing and you can kind of see it ticking away. If you do look in that rear view mirror, it really is a pretty unique looking car. But again, my mind just can't get around this whole stretched Mustang look. So test number 2 is going to be the acceleration and top speed test. So standing start for this one, and we're going to see how the cars launch. Now we've kind of put them in order of power, so slowest first, fastest second, and in all honesty it went as I kind of expected it to. As you see, the Maverick's absolutely gone, and then we've got the likes of the Roadster, the Nova, and the Mach 40 flying past, with the Fugu Z just outrunning the Wicked Fabrication. So let's go and see how the Wicked Fabrication GT got off. As you can see, I think it's just mainly let down due to the tyre compound. It definitely has a weird kind of standard gear ratio. Obviously there's new modifications done to these cars. They are as they are as you buy them, and as you can see, it just struggles to keep up with the Fugu, at least on acceleration. You'll see a little bit later on in the top speed test how it got on. Then we have the Nova. Again, another weird case. This one absolutely loves to spin its tyres. It does get away rather quite well, just gets caught up by the Wicked there, but certainly doesn't seem to be a match for the likes of the Mach 40 in the Roadster Shop Rampage. And I think obviously we've got a clear winner, that being the new GAC Maverick. So overall, not a bad launch from the Nova. Then we have the Roadster. Definitely one that's capable of putting its power down, and in all honesty, I would say this definitely got away quite well compared to the likes of the Nova and such. But still, as you can see, the Mach 40 definitely had the advantage off of the line, absolutely launching itself. And although the Roadster Shop's shorter gear ratio does allow it to get up to those you know, high speeds a little bit quicker after the original acceleration, it just wasn't enough to keep up with the Mach 40 over the long run either. So here we go, this is the Mach 40. As you can see, it gets away really well where the Roadster seems to kind of bog down a bit, and then it just gets caught up in traffic, which kind of obviously kills a bit of its momentum. But I do think the Roadster still has a bit of an advantage there in kind of the mid-speed bit because of its shorter gear ratios, but the Mach 40 is then going to eventually catch up and get past the Roadster Shop Rampage. So then that leaves us with the big brute of the bunch. This is the GAC Maverick. It's kind of expected. As long as you get the power down quite well, it does kind of bog at first, but once it gets going, this thing will absolutely shift. And as you can see here, it's just absolutely gone from the rest of the pack, to be honest. It's 1200 brake horsepower, and eventually it will put it down very, very well. So now we have the top speed test. This was at the 10,000 meter board, and we're going to have the Maverick going across the line as the fastest at 232 miles per hour as it crosses the 10,000 board. Then we have the Mach 40 coming in second with 215 at the board. Then we have the Nova topping out just under 200 miles an hour at 190 to 189 as it hits the board at 10,000 meter mark. So again, not too shabby at all. Obviously no aero really on those cars. Then we have the Roadster Rampage, definitely more of a track ready car. That is going to top out at around about 182 to 181 as it crosses the 10,000 meter. Then we do finally have the Wicked Fabrication. Although it was slower on acceleration than the Fugu, it definitely had the high top speed at 167 as it crosses the 10,000 meter board, and that just obviously leaves the Fugu in last at 160 to 159 miles per hour as it crosses the 10,000 meter board. So it is definitely the slowest on top speed, and I think that was certainly expected. So that is the acceleration and top speed test done. So in terms of acceleration and top speed performance, how would I rank them? Well, there's a clear obvious winner here. It was definitely the GAC Maverick that performed the best of the bunch. It was absolutely lethal. As soon as that power gets down and it begins to get grip, it will absolutely launch itself. It does have the highest top speed of standard, and I think there was no competition really there. In second, we do have the Mach 40. Now, although I don't think it's as good as in kind of the mid-speed as to the Roadster Shop Rampage, mainly because of its longer gear ratios, it certainly launches well off of the line, and it certainly has a higher top speed, giving it advantage over that one. Then we have the Roadster Shop Rampage. Again, very, very good acceleration, fairly decent overall top speed, only just off the Nova. It was very quite close actually as I was dragging down to that 10,000 board, and I'm just going to have to give the advantage to the Roadster. Although it won't top out, it's still not a massive margin, and its acceleration is much better off of the line. So that leaves the Nova then, which in all honesty, it's just the grip off of the line that massively lets it down. Overall, when the power is down, it does have a fairly high top speed. Then we do have the Fugu Z. Again, the acceleration coming in key there, launches much better than a lot of these cars, to be quite honest. It is very much lightweight in comparison, but overall it is let down by an overall higher, lower top speed, pretty much in comparison to all the others, and that's just going to leave the Wicked Fabrication GT. So not only is it let down by the fact that it launches on the comfort tyres, its top speed isn't too high, around about 7 miles per hour more than the Fugu Z, which isn't a massive margin, and again its acceleration is definitely the weakest of the bunch, and I do think that is mainly down to the comfort compound of tyres that this thing runs. So let's move on next to our third category. This time we're going to do a lap time challenge. They got 1 lap each around Tsukuba to basically just test out their performance, and we're going to go with the Fugu Z first. Now I'm expecting this one to perform rather quite well around here. Obviously running on its sports compound of tyres, it's a much more compact design in comparison to the others, and it definitely seems a lot more track ready. So as you can see, it's already performing quite well into the left hander here, where it's going to go back on itself. It's going to accelerate rather quite well. It still does manage to put the power down and kick out. It's by no means perfect, but it certainly is a very balanced track car, and I would recommend this one definitely for the more twisty and tight circuits. So to kind of even it out, I gave a track where realistically where, you know, the overall top speed cars couldn't just absolutely run away with it. They still have a chance to put the power down, which is here now when they exit this corner, and obviously the main straight, but it does allow these slower models to at least kind of keep in, you know, in that race and run, I guess, over a single lap. So Tsukuba was the place that I chose. Coming into the final corner, the Fugu Z is definitely going to round it rather quite well. It does seem a lot more planted than pretty much all of the other cars, and it's going to cross the line in a fairly decent time. Now we have the Wicked Fabrication GT51 up next, and in all honesty, I am not hoping too much for this thing. Obviously the comfort tyres massively letting it down. As you can see, it's just a lot slower through the corners, and on exit it definitely wants to spin up those rear tyres. So eventually it is going to get its power down, and it's going to start running up to the next tight left-hander that's going to go back on itself. Overall, this was actually not as bad as I expected. It just felt much slower through the corners. In terms of its acceleration, it's not great either, so this is definitely a disadvantage compared to the other cars, and I would expect this one to come last. I will show up the full leaderboard once we've done all the laps and I've taken you through. But in terms of the overall lap, it did perform better than expected, but again, it's just a lot worse than the other cars, to be quite honest. There was a bunch of other cars that I guess overall on a lap felt much better than they realistically should have. So the Wicked Fabrication, definitely the weakest of the bunch, just in terms of the way it goes through the corners, you know, the fact that it can't just outrun anything really, and definitely being hampered by those comfort compound of tyres. As it rounds the final corner, it comes out no problem at all. As you can see, running quite wide there, just due to not being able to get the grip down. Now, probably the most mental one of the bunch for, I guess, a lap time challenge is the Chevy Nova. You're going to notice this thing absolutely wants to skid out and get that rear end out. Every time you put the power down, it's basically going to do every single lap sideways, which is what makes it perhaps the most fun car to drive of the bunch. It really is a cool feeling just sticking that rear end out on those big tyres and just letting it drift through. It really is a sensitive machine. No real downforce on this. A very good looking stance to it, and as you can see, it's just a very aggressive lap, pretty much drifting through the entire time as there's a side. sideways basically, and the rear end just hangs out. So we're going to go into the right hander here. We do manage to get it stopped just in time, but then again it's time to put the power down, and it certainly doesn't respond too well to those sports tyres if you're looking for something that's ultimately grippy. But it does accelerate very quick, and it is rather quite good on its top end. So what it kind of lacks in downforce and getting through the corners, well, I guess sideways, it definitely makes up for in acceleration and top speed. So overall, not a bad lap, just kind of hanging it sideways the entire time. Then we have the roadster shot Rampage again. As you can see, the rear end kicking out, but in my opinion this is the most track focused one of the bunch. A ton of aero on this, that huge rear wing, it certainly felt the best in terms of, you know, overall throughout a lap, apart from maybe the Fugu, which felt more planted. This thing is just pretty much unmatched in terms of its one lap potential and overall, I guess, feeling on a racetrack. It really did feel good, even though it's got a ton of power and it still likes to kick out the rear end. It's a lot more controllable, and that aero will certainly bring the car back into touch and, you know, keep it nice and steady as it laps pretty much the entire track. Absolutely no problem. Obviously it does run on sports tyres as standard, it doesn't come with race tyres or anything like that, but stick a set of race tyres on this thing and it is certainly a very, very capable track machine running a ton of power. So we're going to go into the right hander here, come down on the brakes, and then it's hopefully going to get a fairly decent exit. If it does, it's looking like it's in for a very, very quick lap time as it goes up on the curb, little twitch of the rear end and crosses the line, and that is going to be the roadster done. Now we have the Mach 40, and this is a bit of a weird one. Whilst it's very, very quick and very, very good to accelerate with a very potent engine in the back, it felt very heavy and very sluggish through the corners, but overall it was still very, very quick. It was such a bizarre car to really put round a single lap. You know, it's definitely no slouch, but just the weight of it and just the way it went through the corners felt very sluggish in comparison to a lot of the other cars, where the Nova will kind of kick its rear end out and drift through the corners. This thing just felt like you had to take it as properly as possible without kind of risking putting too much power down and spinning that rear end out. It was a really, really bizarre feeling lap, but it still felt quick, and it still certainly was quick, especially in comparison to what I thought this thing would do. Definitely a step up from the Nova, but definitely a step down from the roadster shot Rampage in terms of its one lap pace, and definitely nowhere near as good through the kind of overall one lap feeling as the little compact Fugu Z. So there we go, it's going to finish up its lap a little bit sideways there, not quite as much as a Chevy Nova, but overall a fairly decent lap. Then finally we have the big brute of the bunch, the GAC Maverick. Obviously this thing is an absolute beast, 1200 brake horsepower, and I do think that kind of let it down at the likes of Tsukuba, where going through the corners is definitely something that you want to be good at, even though you can kind of make up time in terms of the high speed sections and the acceleration and such. This one was definitely the weakest through the corners, just mainly for the fact that it was just so powerful. You had to be so careful with the accelerator, you couldn't overdo it. If you overdid it just a little touch too much, then you can expect yourself, you know, being put into the barrier, no problem. But overall it really wasn't a bad lap, and as soon as we get through this little right hander here, we are going to be able to unleash all 1200 brake horsepower, those massive turbos spewing up, and then we are going to run it down to the final corner, where it's going to get through rather quite comfortably and finish up its lap. But it will be interesting to see if the power can make up for any time lost through the corners for the GAC Maverick. So there we go, we're going to finish up the lap there, run onto the curb, little kick of the rear end, and then it does try and kick back around, a little bit of a snap. So let's have a look how we managed to get on. So the roadster shot Rampage, I think quite obviously is the winner, running on the sports mediums. It came across the line as the only car in the exact dead minute, so 1 minute 0.159, nearly into the 59-second barrier. Then in second we have the GAC Maverick, so it did kind of make up for it with its overall top speed. Again, the only other car that runs sports mediums with a 1 minute 1.120. Then we move into the sports hard category cars here. So we have the Mach 40 that comes across with a 101.889, so not too shabby at all. To say it just felt so sluggish through the corners on those sports hards. I certainly think it would have beat the Maverick if it had been running the same compound of tyre as standard. Then we have the Nova with a 104.321, so a big gap there from the 1 minute ones all the way up to the 1 minute fours, again mostly going sideways. It's very, very powerful, no downforce, and just absolutely flinging itself everywhere. Then we have the GT Fugu Z, obviously the least powerful of the bunch, running sports hards again with a 104.788, almost beating the Nova. So it shows you there that power isn't everything. And then finally on the comfort softs, we have the Wicked Fabrication GT51 with a 1 minute 7.143. Again, another massive jump, and that is mainly due to the comfort tyres, just making this one a massive slouch, and a lack of ability really to get up to speed, as it's quite a sluggish and slow car to begin with. Certainly didn't help it over a 1 lap pace. So that's how they rank after a lap time challenge. And now the final category is going to be an overall race. So I asked my subscribers to help me out with this one, to test all of the cars in their standard form, and we're going to do it over 3 little races. Race number 1 is going to be set at the high speed ring. Obviously this is mainly to cater towards the faster cars. We're going to try and go to little tracks that really cater for each car over a sprint race to see which one potentially is the best. And as we can see, the Maverick absolutely flying to begin with, but the downforce on that Roadster shot through the left-hander there just playing into the Roadster's hands and allowing it to take a nice early lead, as the GAC Maverick and the likes of the Mach 40 really do have to get down on the brakes. Mainly the Maverick, which whilst it's insanely quick, does have to brake nice and early. As you can see, the Mach 40 almost staying with the Maverick through this section, and this is where the Roadster Shop Rampage is going to come into its own. As you can see, we've got DWG driving this one here, and it's absolutely beginning to pull a gap on the rest of the field as the Maverick goes a little bit wide, trying to get the power down. It's looking like the Mach 40 is pretty much going to be able to get a move done through the tighter sections, but then it's going to pull away again as we begin to get into the faster sections of the track. Just no downforce at all for the Maverick. It does seem to be very, very skittish on its brakes and a lot slower through the corners. So up it goes onto the berm, the Mach 40. That has finally got the move done. Then we have myself driving the Chevy Nova. Like I mentioned earlier, this will be the one I drive, so that's just kind of hanging on its own in P4. Then we have a battle at the back between the Wicked Fabrication GT51 and the GT Fugu Z. As you can see, this is mainly going to cater in the hands of the Wicked Fabrication. It does overall have a bit of a higher top speed, and well, with this being the high speed ring, it's massively kind of taking the advantage to it. Although the tyres are still the comfort tyres compared to the soft, it just has a much better overall top speed in terms of the high speed points of the high speed ring. Then we're going to go on to lap 2. As you can see, the Roadster Shot Rampage is pretty much gone at this point, but the Mach 40 has managed to pull a gap on the Maverick. The Maverick just not good through these corners, although it's very, very quick. It does have to get on the brakes nice and early, so I think the Mach 40's got this one covered off, at least for a while anyway, until they go back down onto the straight. It's such a strange looking car looking at it, but it is growing on me more as I kind of use it as in footage and such, and kind of see more of it. I really don't think any of these cars are bad looking. So the Maverick's trying to chase it down. We're going to come onto the straight, and this is mainly where the Maverick's going to be able to begin to get that gap down. As you saw, the Chevy Nova just kind of in its own race at this point as these two battle for second place. The Roadster Shot Rampage has definitely gone, and here comes the speed into 4th gear, upwards of 200 miles per hour, where the Chevy Nova, as you can see, just around about 10 to 20 miles per hour down. Further back to finish up lap 2, we do have the Wicked Fabrication GT51, which again has just managed to pull a gap in the faster sections to the GT Fugu Z. I do think the Fugu will just massively close up through the tighter sections, but then again kind of lose any ground it's gained as it goes into those much kind of more long straighty sections, and really where the banking is. But again, I do think the Wicked Fabrication will probably have to slow down more if it gets the banking wrong in comparison to something like, say, the Fugu Z. As you can see, it is managing to maintain its gap there as we go on to the final lap. And then we've got the run into the left-hander there. It's looking like the Fugu's kind of closing it up. It can brake later, but again, it's still a bit twitchy at the rear on exit. So we're going to have a winner for race 1. I think it's pretty much guaranteed to get the win. A nice mix of downforce and acceleration, as well as a decent overall top speed, has just allowed the Roadster Shop Rampage to manage to take the win at high speed ring by a decent margin, just back from the Mach 40. I don't think the Maverick can get its power down soon enough to catch that. No, it cannot. So there goes the Mach 40. There goes the Maverick in P3. Then in a lonely P4, we're going to have the Chevy Nova. As you can see, it just couldn't really hold its own. It wasn't slow enough to be back with the Wicked or the Fugu, but it certainly wasn't fast enough to keep on the likes of the Maverick and the Mach 40 on a high-speed track. So we're going into the final corner. It's looking like the Fugu's a little bit closer this time on exit. Will it be able to get the run down? I don't think so. I do think we're going to see the Wicked just take this one, but only just, as the Fugu seems to be closing up in the slipstream. So there we have it. The Wicked Fabrication 5th and the Fugu 6th. On to the next race now, and we're going to go to Miyabi. This is a Kyoto driving park, essentially a go-kart track. That's really kind of what mainly gets run here. This is to kind of give the likes of the Fugu a chance, but still allow the high speed of the likes of the Maverick to really be, you know, putting the power down. There's not too many corners here, so it's a fairly straightforward track, and the Maverick has definitely gone out fighting in the early stages, but again, is it going to be let down by the lack of downforce in comparison to the Roadster Shop Rampage? It does look like as it goes wide there. That's going to allow the Roadster to go down the inside on the right hand side, and again use all of its power as it begins to power up the main straight. As you can see in the background, that is my Nova getting it sideways. I think it's only just been beaten by the Mach 40, mainly due to the fact that the Mach 40 did end up running into the back of the Nova at the start. As you can see, the Maverick closing the ground there at the end of the straight as the Nova goes through, and then we have the Mach 40 and P4. Now we have the Fugu leading the Wicked Fabrication. Definitely more expected here with it being a more compact track. I'd expect the Fugu just to overperform in comparison to the Wicked Fabrication, so that one's kind of holding its own. I think we're starting to see a pattern here in terms of performance. It's kind of these two in their own little battle. Then we have the likes of the Mach 40, the Roadster Shop Rampage, sorry, not the Roadster Shop Rampage, the Nova and the Maverick, really, that kind of are in their own category. Again, low downforce, a lot of power, very kind of skiddy, and then kind of in a category of its own is the Roadster Shop Rampage. As you can see, managing to pull out a massive gap there in comparison to the rest of the field. However, for P2, it's rather quite close. The Maverick putting all its power down before they get into the right hand. I think everybody ran wide here, to be quite honest. And again, we do have the Mach 40 keeping it nice and close through the more twisty sections, with the Nova again just kind of going sideways absolutely everywhere it wants to go, meaning that it just really cannot keep up. It's almost, you know, again, a car that sort of sits in its own category. Whilst it can keep up at times, eventually it's going to fall back. So as we can see, looking like the Mach 40 may be able to get a move done there on the Maverick. Then we're going to move on a little bit further back. We're going to see that the Fugu's just having a bit of a bad time of it. So the Wicked Fabrication has managed to get that move done. Up front, though, absolutely dominating is DWG in the Roadster Shop Rampage. This car is absolutely just bolted, to be quite honest. I don't think there's going to be much stopping this thing from taking the win unless it has a very, very big off. You can see the gap's absolutely huge. I think we're only on like lap 3 out of 5, and it's absolutely gone. Maverick leading the way there, though. As you can see, it's managing to pull out a bit of a gap on the straights from the Mach 40, which is very much going to close that gap again until we get back on the straight. So as you can see, it's beginning to start to reel it in as they both go a little bit wide there, as the Nova is again kind of skids through every single corner going. Looking like they both got it a little bit wrong and wide there, but it's looking like the Mach 40 may be a little bit closer than it was on the previous lap. So let's see the Maverick put its power down and outrun basically both of these cars. As you can see, the Nova just beginning to creep back in there after that little mistake, but again, it's just not enough to get them going. So again, the Maverick has to brake nice and early, whereas the Mach 40 is much more stable and better on its brakes. Into the right-hander, who is going to manage to get out the corner just in front. It's looking like the Maverick's just got it, but again, I do think that lack of downforce is probably going to cost it, as the Chevy Nova again just begins to go sideways absolutely everywhere. As you can see, this thing's very, very skittish in its standard form. Then we have the Wicked Fabrication managing to pull out a bit of a gap on the Fugu Z. Again, it's going to run away in the faster sections in terms of the main straight and such, but I don't think overall the Fugu's really had a great race, so it's not massively reeling it in currently. So we do have a race winner, and that's going to be the Roadster Shop. P2 is going to go to the Maverick, only just. The Mach 40 only just beating the Nova there in the end, so I don't know if that was due to a mistake. I honestly cannot remember for the life of me. Then P5 is going to go to the Wicked Fabrication once again, I think mainly due to the fact that the Fugu Z had a pretty terrible race overall. So P6 for the Fugu. Now we're going to reverse grid them here. As you can see, the Fugu is going to get P1, the Wicked Fabrication P2 and such, and we're going to go back to Tsukuba to see how they perform under race conditions. The Mach 40 absolutely launching away as the Wicked Fabrication of Fugu get a bit of contact there, looking like the Mach 40 also went wide. So out front we do have the Maverick being able to kind of block the road. Again, it's going to have the power on the straights, but that's going to be about it. And we do have the road shop just behind there as the Fugu trying to get through past the Wicked Fabrication. I do think that car's going to mainly struggle here, just due to its tyre compound more than anything. The Maverick, though, holding its own. As you can see, the Chevy Nova going sideways yet again. Absolutely hanging the rear end out. It's absolutely bizarre just to watch this thing try and do a lap. It's rather quite funny. It's looking like the Mach 40 did begin to make up a few places, and the Maverick has gone wide there. So we're going to go onto the straight. I'm assuming the Maverick's going to be able to outrun that Nova, no problem. And yes, it does. So the Nova's just going to tuck in behind as the Mach 40 then makes a move on the straights on the Fugu Z. So out front now we have the road to the shop, and I honestly think this is where it's going to gap the rest of the field. I don't think there's any real looking back for that car at this point. We have the Nova again just kind of going sideways, managing to get up to P2, closely followed by the Mach 40, which is going to go a little bit deep there. Fugu Z up to P4, a much better race and a much more suited track for that car. Although it's not overly quick, it can absolutely hold its own through the corners, where a lot of these bigger, more powerful machines are massively struggling to get on the brakes and get it through the corners. The road shot Rampage, though, is going to continue to lead, as you can see, into the right hand. It looks a lot more stable than any of the others, as the G8C Nova going sideways, followed by the Mach 40 once again. The Mach 40 overall, though, I do think is going to have the advantage. It just feels like a much better car in terms of how it is on a track. So as you can see, it's closing up where the GHC Nova will just absolutely kick the rear end out, but I guess you can sort of use that as a bit of a blocking power. Fugu Z in its own lonely race, with the Maverick then having to put its power down to overtake the Wicked Fabrication. You can see the speed difference ridiculous, but again it's going to struggle back on the brakes, and into the gravel it goes as the Wicked Fabrication once again makes its move, and is certainly no match for the Fugu Z around here. So onto the final lap, we have the Roadster leading the way. As you can see, there's a bit of a battle in the background there, as we have a sideways Nova and the Mach 40. Looking like the Mach 40's just got this move done, and I'm going to assume this is going to be the point where that thing can absolutely sprint away from the Nova. It definitely puts the power down a lot better. Obviously the engine in the rear of that thing, where I believe it's in the front of the Nova, almost certain on that one. I don't see how it would work any other way around, but I guess the same could be said for the one that looks like a old Ford Mustang or Shelby, whatever you want to call it. And certainly it is beginning to pull away. The Fugu Z almost holding its own and almost catching the cars in front, so definitely a much more track focused car, with the likes of the Wicked Fabrication being chased down still by the Maverick. So into the final corner, it's going to be the Roadster Shop Rampage to win 3 races out of 3, certainly holding its own and being definitely the best of the bunch for an overall race and track pace. In second, it's going to be a close one, but the Mach 40 is definitely going to get it after a few more mistakes as the sideways Nova begins to come through. Fugu Z down on power, but taking a very respectable P4, only just a bit back, and then we're going to have the Maverick just outrun the Wicked Fabrication. So it's time to rank them, and in all honesty, on my overall opinion, if you had to buy one, it should definitely be the Roadster Shop Rampage. It's just the most capable of all of the cars, especially in a track focused game. P2, I'm going to have to give it to the GAC Maverick, mainly because of that insane overall top speed. And although it's a bit of a handful through the corners, if you do manage to nail it down, this is still a very, very usable car. And that, honestly, that top speed and acceleration is just not matched by any other SEMA award winning cars. Then into P3, it's got to be the Mach 40, only just missing out on P2, to be quite honest. Much more balanced than the rest of them, to be quite honest. I honestly cannot fault this car. Although it's not the best through the corners, it certainly is a car that almost kind of holds its own in its own little category. P4, I'm going to have to give it to the Nova, to be quite honest. Although I absolutely love this car, I think it's absolutely stunning. It's awesome that it goes sideways. It's just let down in terms of its on-track performance in a track racing game. Then we have the Fugu Z. Again, just down on power a lot compared to the others, but overall this is a very balanced machine, very good through the track, but again, don't expect it to be keeping up in terms of its, overall top speed. It's just kind of let down by those. And then finally, it's the Wicked Fabrication. As much as I love the look of this car, it's mainly let down to the, the fact that it runs on comfort compound of tyres. In all honesty, that's the only thing I can really doubt it for. It's not that good for a track, but in terms of its, honestly, its looks, it's just something else. So there we have it. That is the SEMA cars ranked. We do have a king of the SEMA cars, and that's definitely the Roadster Shock Rampage. A very, very good overall car, and for 300,000 credits, it's definitely a step above the rest. Like I said, they all cost the same, but in all honesty, when push came down to shove, the Roadster Shock Rampage absolutely stood above. So there we have it. That is all of the SEMA award winning cars ranked that are currently within GT7. If we do get any others in the future, I will go ahead and test them out. Thank you so much for watching. If you like this content, don't forget to leave a like, comment and subscribe. Turn notifications on so you don't miss an upload from me. I upload GT7 and motorsport related content each and every day for your viewing pleasure. Big thank you to my sponsors, the Controller People and Poggers, for their continued support, as well as my channel members. Thank you so much for your continued kind donations to the channel and such. I'll have my Twitter, my Discord and my donation link down in the description down below. Have a fantastic day, guys. Peace.